What's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing well and hope you're all staying safe. This is the cream of the crop weapon that I want to talk about today because I just went on this unbelievable run and I feel that this is such an important weapon to share with you guys and just to let you guys know how to use it and how good this weapon can actually be. And I'm talking about none other than the meat skewer. So the meat skewer got a huge buff in the 1.6 Dead Cells update. So actually, just to backtrack, in 1.0, it basically did a 4-hit combo where you would skew through the enemy twice and then do 2 down smashes. And it was pretty good. Honestly, I had it in the A tier or something like that. It was a pretty good weapon. In 1.1 or 1.2, they changed it to something atrociously bad. So basically what happened is that you would stab the enemy twice and then go through them 3 times. It did basically no damage. They changed it to being part tactics in 1.3 or 1.4, and it was still really bad. It was actually the worst melee tactics weapon in the game, and I had it in the lowest tier in 1.4, in the D tier, for melee weapons. So I made a suggestion on Reddit or something that, they really need to fix this weapon because it used to be really good and then it was changed to something horrible. So I want to see something that can be utilized in the best way possible. And I actually have footage of where it used to be in those bad days. I do have a win. Wasn't the best thing in the world though. But now it's an incredible weapon. In 1.6, they completely revamped the meat skewer. And now what it does is that you skew through the enemy once, you do 1 strike up and 1 strike down. And if you skew through the enemies, those 2 next strikes are going to be critical hits. So there's a lot of things that we need to cover with this weapon. And we will absolutely get to all of that. But before we start the guide, I just want to let you guys know that I am officially going to be streaming every single Friday at 7 p.m. on Twitch. You can find me at twitch.tv/Asundar. That's ASUNDAR. I'm not going to be playing Dead Cells, but we are going to be analyzing runs in real time. You get to see my thought process as I look at my runs. Basically getting insight into how I'm viewing my runs, how I analyze certain situations. So if that's something that interests you, you can absolutely feel free to join. Again, it's Friday at 7 p.m. That is Eastern Standard Time. I live in Ohio. We are Eastern Standard Time. So with that, leave a like, subscribe for more Dead Cells content, and enjoy the guide, everybody. So as I noted earlier, the meat skewer has a 3 combo attack pattern. So you can see it right here. It basically will go through the enemy and then you do 2 vertical strikes. So the benefit of this is that I can skew through all the enemies. They will not see me. And in fact, they'll be confused, as you can see with that elite kill. These guys will never ever see me coming, and it's so beneficial. Now with this giant's eyeball, you can see me getting damage off so quickly because of the just sheer speed of this weapon. The Guardian Knight here is just confused, and there's a little bit of a breach with the dash as well. These enemies just do not see me coming. Like this Guardian Knight and then the Demon, it is a very fast weapon. It's deceptively fast, I would say. Hand of the King doesn't know where I am. I can just keep going 1-2, 1-2. And then I'm able to get out of precarious situations. I can escape situations where I would normally be getting hit, which is incredibly important. Even with Giant's Hands, I can hit them both at the same time, get some residual damage off. This is a really good example of meat skewer in a tactics context. So I can do the 1-2, use blowgun as support, which we will get to in a minute. But it also allows me to escape because tactics can be so glass cannon at times. So right here, I'm in such a bad position. I use meat skewer to be able to get away, then get the kills from there. So it's incredibly useful. So right here, I'm trapped in the corner against Concierge, and I can use the blowgun and the meat skewer to be able to get away from getting hit by him. So the most important part about the meat skewer is that it has iframes on the dash. And what iframes are is that you're invincible. So in this example, you can see me hitting a Thorny from the back. And that's because I have invincibility when I do the dash with the meat skewer. It allows me to go through things like ground shakers, thornies, different attacks like Hand of the King or the Giant, which will be coming up in just a second. So right here, I'm kind of forced to wait for the crystals to come down. And I said, okay, let's just skew through the Giant's hands so we get some more damage off on it. And then I'm able to kill the hand and then get the eyeball from there. This is an example of a different build where I use the Rapier as like my main source of damage. So I roll Rapier and then skew out of the last strike in the combo. So there's so many different types of ways to attack with the meat skewer. You can attack just straight up, get those crits. You can use it to escape precarious situations and then reset and then attack again. So it's such a diverse weapon in attacking. The thing you need to remember about the meat skewer, however, is that the combo does last for a few seconds. So for example, if you skew through an enemy and you want to skew through them again, you got to roll away and then kind of work on, okay, like I need to get away from these guys for a while so until I can skew again. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing the vertical strikes, which could get you in a little bit of trouble. But if your idea is to go for the critical hits and just to get as much damage off as possible, then you want to stay as close to the enemy as possible. The thing to note is that if you don't hold your direction anywhere, the meat skewer and the critical hits will remain in the same direction. So you got to turn around if you want to do those critical hits, assuming that you go through the enemy. So that is attacking in a nutshell. So do you guys remember when I was talking about escaping situations earlier? Creating yourself space, things like that? So this is where the meat skewer really comes in handy in tactics. So I love using it as a support weapon for 4 ranged weapons. And these are the infantry bow, the marksman's bow, the quick bow, and the blowgun. And of course there are others that I'll mention at the end, but these are the 4 that I really like. So to get started on the infantry bow is a bow that basically does critical hits at short range. It is a very powerful type of weapon, but you may not see the returns on it until you start hitting late game and start getting more stats and start seeing better returns. But here's the nice thing about the infantry bow. You use it in relation to something else that can give it support. And what is that something that can give it support? Well, the thing that this video is about, the meat skewer. So as you can see in these clips, I basically use the meat skewer to skew through the enemies, create myself some space, and I'm close enough to the point where I can actually do critical hits with the infantry bow, because you have to be fairly close to the enemy, pretty much right next to them, at most just a little bit away. But the meat skewer gives me enough space to be able to skew behind the enemy, turn around quickly, and fire off my infantry bow. And this whole turning around quickly thing is going to be kind of a theme in the next few minutes. Next up, we have the marksman's bow, which is basically the opposite of the infantry bow. So it's a slightly different strategy. So the marksman's bow will do critical hits if you're far away. So with the meat skewer, what you want to do is you want to skew through the enemy and then basically roll away, and then you have an opportunity to be able to hit enemies with your marksman's bow. And from there, you can kind of play around with it and then just see, okay, like, where should I use the meat skewer? Where should I use the marksman's bow? Meat skewer is great for that close range, kind of smaller platform type of thing, while the marksman's bow is much better for the longer platforms. And so it's really good if you're kind of in a precarious situation. Like I said earlier, in terms of escaping, you can escape using the meat skewer because that dash is really powerful. Then you can get away and then roll away, turn around, fire the marksman's bow, and then you're set. After that, we have the quick bow. And the quick bow is a very fast ranged weapon. And if you haven't guessed the pattern by now, it's that I really like using fast ranged weapons with the meat skewer. And so the quick bow, you hold it down and then you fire off as much as you want. And the way this works with meat skewer, it's the same thing as the infantry bow. So you skew through the enemies, turn around quickly, and start firing off the quick bow. And here's the thing. While the quick bow doesn't do much damage initially, once it gets going, you start getting critical hits once the arrows are inside the enemies, and quick bow has a good amount of ammo. And so you'll be able to start getting those crits pretty quickly, and the enemy will not even see you. And this is what I talked about earlier in terms of enemies getting confused and not being able to see you. Because you're dashing through the enemies and you have the iframes during that moment, you can actually just turn around quickly. The enemy usually hasn't turned around by the time that you're firing off the quick bow, and even if they do see you and start their attack pattern, you've probably already killed them by then. It works great in a Ripper type of build. So Ripper is basically, if you have a bunch of arrows stuck in an enemy, you can use a melee weapon to basically get them out. Works amazingly well with something like the meat skewer. And so the last that I want to talk about is the blowgun. I do have a video on the blowgun. It is a guide on the blowgun, and I talk about the meat skewer for a little bit. But to go a little bit more into detail, basically the way this works is that it's the same thing as all the other bows. So you skew through the meat skewer, you turn around, and then you fire off the blowgun. But the cool thing about the blowgun is that it does critical hits if you're right behind the enemy. So you skew through the enemy, you turn around quickly, and you're probably going to be behind them, and then you can fire off the blowgun and be able to get that critical hit and most likely a kill, because the blowgun is very, very powerful when you are facing the enemy's back. So that is a combination that I really, really enjoy. And if I had to pick one bow that I like more than all the others, I would say probably the quick bow, but I really like using it with the blowgun. I do have a completed run with this. It is the Squad Goals build. You can check that out on my channel. I had a great time making that. I do want to do a meat skewer and quick bow run at some point. That's probably going to be what my next run is. I just completed a a meat skewer and Hayabusa gauntlets build that I will be posting on this channel at some point, so definitely be on the lookout for that. So I use meat skewer in both an attack and a support context, so it's really, really interesting. So I definitely recommend you guys check that out. Other weapons that I really enjoy using with the meat skewer are probably more weapons that are reliant on space. So things like the Valmont whip, you skew, and then you're behind the enemy, turn around quickly, use the Valmont whip, you should be able to get a crit from there. You can use the Assassin's Dagger with the meat skewer, so you skew, use phaser, Assassin's Dagger, and then you're set. You can also use stuff like the magic missiles, you can use the electric whip, you can use pretty much anything that has a decent amount of range and can kill an enemy rather quickly. If you have inflammable oil on your meat skewer, you skew through the enemy, use a pyrotechnics, or use a fire blast, or use a torch. Just something that kind of fulfills that support role that meat skewer is so good at. As far as what mutations you want to take with the meat skewer, it really just depends on what you want out of it. So if you're using it as a support weapon in tactics, you might not want to take something that directly benefits the meat skewer, but rather something that helps out the ranged weapon that you're using. So Hunter's Instinct would be really good in that situation. Caltrops is amazing if you're trying to run that sort of melee / ranged type of build. If you're using it as like a main attacking weapon, if you're running Brutality, Open Wounds is always a good choice. Berserker is always a good choice. The melee mutation is always good. Just your general Brutality mutations. If you're running Tactics, I really like Predator. Predator is probably the best on the meat skewer because of its quickness. You can quickly kill enemies and then move on to the next one, maintaining your invisibility. Initiative is also really good because it powers up that dash. When you hit an enemy with your dash, you can basically get off a couple nice critical hits, and then by the time you're done with the critical hits, most enemies will probably be done by that point, with the exception of probably bosses and maybe ground shakers. So mutations are a little bit kind of dependent on what you're trying to achieve with the meat skewer. I don't have any serious recommendations in terms of what you have to run, but really just feel it out. Feel out what you're using, what are some of the weapons that you're enjoying to use, and just kind of go from there. Really just feel it out and practice it and find out what works for you. So that is going to wrap it up for me. I hope that at least some of you were able to get a new view of how good the meat skewer is. I know that a lot of people still are kind of uneasy about it. Ever since the change, it's just a little bit weird. It's definitely a very unique weapon. And having that opportunity to be able to practice using it over the last 3 to 4 months whenever it was changed, I've really grown to appreciate its various strengths. It doesn't do the most amount of damage in the world, absolutely, but it works in so many different types of ways that it's almost always an instant pickup for me as soon as I see it. And I love running it on different custom builds for tactics just to try out the neat little synergies that it can create with different ranged weapons. I love using it as a main attacking weapon. It works so nicely in that. It definitely takes a little bit of practice to use. Some other weapons that take practice to use are the Valmont's Whip and Nerves of Steel. This is another weapon that definitely you're going to have to try to feel out and then see how you can utilize it to the best of your abilities. But again, as always with Dead Cells, it's all about practicing and trial and error and just seeing what works for you. So thank you so much for joining me on this video. I really appreciate you guys taking your time out of your day to watch my content. Leave a like, subscribe for more Dead Cells content, and as for that meat skewer Hayabusa gauntlets run, tune into Twitch. Friday at 7 p.m. I will be analyzing that run in great detail. So thank you guys again, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great night, everybody.
One day I woke up, I didn't have shit. I had to work hard just to grab this. Blue faces stacked up, that's my fetish. I'm ready for these bandits. They said I wouldn't make it, who asked you? I got brought into this life I didn't ask to. I'ma make most of it all cause I had to. You get money from your mama, I chase it because I had to.